Hey guys, I want to show you guys how to use TwinMotion. So this is a real-time rendering software. It's based on the Unreal Engine, so it's a gaming engine. Since a lot of you guys are doing 3D and VR in your projects, this is actually a pretty good introduction to Unreal because it allows you to set up your scenes very quickly. It's mainly used by architects and stuff to kind of create environments, 3D environments to do VR and kind of like walkthrough of like the space. So it has a lot of limitations in terms of the gaming engine. Like you can't do a lot of the AI stuff in like the scripting in Unreal Engine that you don't have access to that. But it's actually pretty easy to learn. So it is something I think that you guys should know, just so it would be an introduction to kind of what Unreal Engine is. Okay. So you can open up Twinmotion. It's actually available in the lab. When you first open up the software, it gives you how to, it's a very simple thing. It uses kind of, WASD to kind of walk around the space. The middle mouse button is the pan, and then the shift and middle mouse button to orbit, and then right button to look around. So that's kind of how you navigate easily. Okay, so let's take a look at it. I'm just going to close this. So when you've opened up the scene, this is what you see. If I look around, I just hold down the right mouse button and I can kind of look around, right? If I don't have anything in the scene right now, it's just an empty ground and in the background of a city. So you can change some of the stuff, but this is the menu layout. It's actually pretty streamlined. The left tab here, this little arrow, if I click on it, this gives you access to the library, materials, different types of materials, trees, landscapes, objects like furniture, stuff like that. Okay, lights, characters, vehicles. So I'm going to close this for now. If I expand on the right side, this actually shows you everything that's in my scene. Right now, I only have the starting ground plane, which I can actually delete. If I left click on it, it highlights in yellow, and then I hit delete on the keyboard, and then that goes away. Okay, so we'll add like a ground plane of our own later. Now, the if I click on the little eyeball here, this allows you to adjust the time of day, the speed of your movement. Right now is set to bicycle or walking speed. You can take a screenshot. Right now we're in a fly mode. You can also go down to like a walk mode. Okay, this gives you different, whether it's like a plan. This is a 3D view right now, cropping. And if you have a VR goggle, you can actually plug it in. You can go to the VR mode. Okay. Most of the time in Twinmotion, you're actually bringing in models that you've created elsewhere. And so you would start off from the import command here. This is just the import. You can click on is actually where the file is. On the top of the your menu here, this burger menu, it just gives you new scene, open, save. You can import. It's a demo scene of like a materials room, and there's tools and preferences and things like that. Okay. What we're going to do first off, right now, I'm just going to show you. We're going to create a simple landscape without bringing any models in. Just going to bring in vegetation and landscape. If I click on this little arrow, I click on vegetation and landscape. There's some landscape to start off. I can pick like this rocky grassland, and then I'm just going to drag it over to the main viewport here, and it's just going to prepare the terrain. So when it's done, it's going to give you the kind of this randomly generated kind of hill area. Now we've got the city kind of poking through beyond, so I don't really want to see that. So you can actually change your background under the if I click on the settings here, this is the third command over, right? This is context, this is setting, this is import. So under settings, under location, if I click on that, it gives me the time of day, the month, kind of like where I'm at, also the background photo. You can actually bring in your own background photo later. Right now, I'm going to click on the city. And I'm just going to pick like a countryside, so it'll kind of blend in a little bit better with our terrain. Okay. Now let's take a look. I'm going to click on this terrain object again. If I click on it, it highlights yellow. And now, if I can orbit around this thing, I can use the W key and kind of come down closer to the ground, right? I'm kind of flying up here. You can kind of navigate around using the keyboard and then your mouse button. So I'm going to scope the terrain. We're going to create kind of an kind of a indentation in the terrain to create a basin for like a lake. All right. So right now this is my diameter. This is the raise. If I click on this thing, it actually creates a little hill. If I change it to dig, it actually sinks the terrain. If I increase my diameter, it shows me the like the radius of like what I'm doing, right? So then now I can create like a bigger. This is 40 meters. It's gonna create like a deeper, you know, a larger radius. The smooth command actually begins to smooth out your, you know, like the moves that you've made. The noise actually, introduces kind of randomly generated. See, so like sometimes it goes up, sometimes it goes down. You can kind of begin to, you know, introduce kind of randomly, like up and down hills onto your, onto your deformation here. So I'm just gonna begin to create a, if I flatten this, you'll notice it begins to kind of create little plateaus in the area as well, right? You can smooth this out a little bit and begin to kind of shrink this thing down. So, you can kind of just go ahead and create like a, sometimes it's a little hard to see how big your movements are, so we'll have to start adding some context in a little bit. But let's say that that's kind of what I want to use for my lake. Okay, so we're gonna create like a little nature scene here, and let's take a look. So now I want to bring in some water. Okay, so under my weather, I go back to my settings. I go to weather. Under effects, so this is the settings, right? Weather, and then go to effects. We'll explore the weather stuff in a bit. I click on ocean, and then now, right now it's off. If I click on, that's the water level is too high. I'm gonna move it down. So it begins to, you don't want to flood the whole valley. This may be something like that, okay? So now you begin to have like a little bit of a little embankment here. So what we're going to do now is I'm going to show you guys how to kind of begin to paint your new materials onto this landscape, okay? Let's click on the landscape really quickly. I'm going to go up, click on the landscape again. We're going to paint the terrain this time. So when I paint the terrain, I click on, it switches to my paint mode. So we can do that again in case I went too fast on it. Okay, so if I click on the terrain here, we were on scope terrain. Now we're going to go to paint terrain. So if I click on it, so now it brings up the type of materials that I've got. So this is the materials that I can choose from. I'm going to come down to ground under nature. So if you go down to man-made, obviously it takes you to asphalt and roads and things which we don't want to use. So if you go down to nature, you can kind of select what type of rocks you want to paint. Let's say I want to paint like a kind of bigger rocks, and then I'm gonna paint like some smaller rocks here. Okay, so we're gonna have some smaller rocks and some big rocks. I'm gonna put some big rocks closer to the shoreline, and then I'm going to so I'm just gonna paint it like this. As long as like I come across here, it'll start to paint my rocks along the shore, right? So, okay, like that, right? So now you can kind of go all the way across. We're just gonna like at a certain point, I'm just gonna leave it. You can create as big of an environment as you want. I'm just gonna focus on this little area though, okay, to create our scene. So I'm gonna put some rocks. Actually, I picked the small rocks instead of the big rocks. So we're gonna actually start with the big rocks, and then I'm gonna move the small rock over onto the other side. Okay, so now I'm gonna go to small rocks, I can also change the opacity so that it begins to, it doesn't completely override my grass area, right? So it just kind of comes across like this. And also I want to have a kind of a transition from the rocks to the grass. So I'm going to switch to grassy ground here. And you can begin to, kind of, kind of paint in the area. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. Maybe the grassy ground is a little too brown. I might pick something else actually. Maybe, no, I don't know. Maybe mossy rocks. Pick some ground plant. A lot of times when you're doing this, actually, we're going to have some grass that will cover a lot of this stuff as well. So you don't necessarily have to get this under layer right. But it is kind of the stuff that you'll see poking underneath. Okay. So let's say that you aren't happy with this. You can kind of play around with it. You can also change the shape. See right now we're on circle. I can go to blobs or stain, and if I go to like blobs, and if I paint it, so this way the it's not going to be circular kind of pattern. It's going to be more kind of blotchy. See that? So it can begin to introduce kind of more noise into the landscape here. All right. Okay. So right now we've only been painting things like in terms of the materials, texture on a landscape, and it actually is in 2 dimension, right? So they're just almost kind of like pictures of rocks. Now they have displacement, so they look like they're actually 3D, but they're actually 2D. Now we can actually scatter now some real 3D stuff onto our landscape here. Okay, so to do that, I want to come down to the context, and I want to come down to vegetable paint. All right, so vegetable paint, like this painting, the scatter tool in TwinMotion, is based on the Unreal engines, was actually pretty powerful. So it's a kind of a randomly generated, tool that allows you to kind of like scatter things quickly. So I'm going to pick on grasses and flowers here. So under my library, it'll say drop a model. I'm going to paint some grasses first. So go to vegetation and landscape. I'm going to come down to grasses and flowers. And then you can kind of pick what type of grasses you want. Let's say that I want to pick some wild grass. I'm going to drag it over. You can have as many of these as you want, by the way, guys. So I'm just going to go ahead and pick some dandelions, some weeds. I'm going to pick some tall grass here. And so pick like those types of grasses, okay? Okay, so let's take a look at this now. So now I'm going to use the paint command, and this is the size of the paint. Okay. Now you'll notice the density is grayed out. The density is actually controlled by each one of these objects. Right now they're all at 30%. Okay. So if I were to, let's say, increase my diameter here a little bit, and then I'm just going to go ahead and just begin to paint this. So now as I come across here and I paint my my grass fields here, okay, it's going to be kind of like a prairie here. You'll notice that as I go further and further away, the engine doesn't show the grass until I move closer to it. That's the way the gaming engine works because it can't show, it does, it tries to optimize the number of three-dimensional objects you see in the scene by only limiting it to your field of view. So as I move closer, it actually renders out these grasses, right? So now these are actually 3D models of grass. You'll see that as soon as I come into them, you'll actually see them now. You can like interact with the wind and things. Okay, so that's like let's say that's pretty good. I mean, if you want to change your mind, let's say I wanted to take out the tall grass, I can just hit delete. And then the tall grass goes away. If I click on both, now they're all gone. But actually, I like those tall grass, and I'm going to bring some back. So you can always, come back and edit any of these things when you're working on it. Okay, so I'm just going to bring it back, and now you see it comes back. If I bring this guy, now you see that comes back as well. It just gets repopulated. Now, one thing also with the scatter command here, guys, if I don't have anything selected, then you don't see it being active. If I select on it, it automatically goes back to my context menu, and then it shows me that this is my grass and things, okay? So if I want to scatter now something else and not grass, I'm going to left click anywhere to deselect it. I'll come back to the context menu again, and I'll use the vegetation paint again. And this time, even though it's vegetation paint, you can actually paint anything, not just vegetation. So I'm going to pick some rocks. I'm gonna drag some rocks. So, like sometimes some of these rocks, they have like a picture of a person that shows you how big those rocks are in relation to the person, right? So these are huge. So I don't want to make that bold, but I'm gonna I'm gonna create some rocks now that will be closer to the shoreline, and it will, you know. So, okay, so now I've picked a couple of rocks, and one thing again, if I click on it, it shows me the density is 30%. So I don't want all of these objects to be at 30%, because if they are, it's going to fill my whole field here with rocks. It's going to look like I'm in a rock quarry instead, which I don't want to do. So I want to left click on this rock, change the density to 5%, so do it for each one of these ones that you're selecting. Just click on the density, and you can change it to 5, and then just click on a new one, and then that will change it. Also, if I want to go back to this guy really quickly, go to vegetation paint. So now I'm ready to go. So I'm going to click on the paint command, and I'm going to change the diameter a bit. So now at 5%, if I were to now begin to click on my rocks, it's going to create like a field of rocks, right? Near the embankment here, see? So I think that looks probably pretty good. You can kind of create as far as you want. Again, the photo away you get the from where you're standing, it just won't show it as much. Okay. So something like that is good. We're going to create, it's kind of like a little environment near the bank here of the lake. Okay. All right. So now we've got some grass, we've got some rocks. I'm going to do the same thing now for some trees. So we're going to create some trees now. We're going to create like a tree that will kind of be, start from here. Okay. So again, we'll go back to settings. Oh, not the settings, but to the context. Go to vegetation paint. The paint, I like it more in the scatter because, unless you're scattering over a large area, the paint allows you to control exactly where things want to go. So now you can just kind of pick what type of trees you want. Okay, so you kind of go through the library here, and I'm just going to pick like, so again, it shows you a little picture of a person. It just shows you like, it gives you a little idea of how tall some of these trees are, and also the age of them. Okay, so you can kind of pick the trees that you want to use. So I'm just going to go ahead and just pick some random one here. I'm going to pick some birch. I'm going to pick some maybe European beech. So obviously you kind of want to pick trees that kind of belong in the right, in the same, kind of ecosystem, right? You don't want to just put, randomly, put on some cactuses and cypress trees and things in here. It's probably not the right environment. So I'm going to go ahead and just pick, you can also pick some smaller trees and stuff as well. Okay. So, let's say that, you're happy with these trees. Now, once again, right now it wants it at 30%, so I'm actually going to move it to like 5% or something. So the density will be smaller. Okay. And you can also come back and increase, if you want one tree to pop up more than another, you can also do that. Okay. Okay, so now I'm going to come back to the vegetation paint command, the little paintbrush command. And then now I can begin to just, paint my my tree. Actually, it's hang on a second. I think that I might have to put in more density actually. Whoop. Yeah. So yeah, I actually need to put in a little bit more because otherwise it doesn't really. So I'm gonna go 30%. Go to 30% here. Yeah, because I think otherwise it's with the trees, it's not dense enough, so like not enough will show up. Okay, and click on this guy. I think 30% is okay. And okay. Also, I probably need to increase my paint diameter as well. So there you go. So as I paint this area, this is the area where the trees will be, the band. And then it kind of randomly places the trees in those areas, okay? There you go. So there. Okay. Now, if I wanted to change, I don't like this little tree. I'm going to delete it. Okay. And what is this blackthorn tree? I think. There you go. So once you begin to delete trees, you'll see that it begins to populate those areas with other trees. Okay. So that's pretty good, I think. Um, Now you can add more trees. So I think that's not too bad. I'm gonna like come ahead and I'm gonna go over here and just create more trees on this side. Okay. So like our scene would just kind of take place in this little area. Okay. Mm. Now, put in some trees right on the bank. If I want to delete it, just switch to your eraser, and then it just goes away, right? Just erase this guy. So whatever layer that you're on, guys, you can kind of go back to the erase tool anytime. If I click on the rocks and hit the erase tools, it'll start to delete those rocks, okay? All right. So now we've got our trees, we've got some rocks, and you can kind of begin to explore a little bit. There's a lot of things in the menu. You don't have to use the paint command. If I want to have just like one thing under miscellaneous, let's say there are some fallen trees that I want to use, I can just left click and drag it. It'll just place it on the on the scene, right? So you can kind of place each one of these things anywhere. So same deal with if I were to, I want to create some bushes. Let's say I want to create some bushes as well. For bushes, I'm going to use the vegetation paint again. So let's go back up, vegetation paint, let's pick some bushes. And we're going to pick like, I don't know, like some fern or something. We'll pick some bushes here. Awesome fern. Here. We'll pick some flowers. Okay. So now we've got some reed grass and things as well. Okay, so let's say that that's enough. I'm going to use the paintbrush tool. And again, just kind of move it across here. Kind of place it wherever you want. So you can kind of layer, you see, your trees, your rocks, your bushes. Just layer them on top of each other, and they begin to create a much more complex environment. And if there's one type of plant that you don't like, you can always just like delete them, okay? So I think that's not too bad. It's probably okay in terms of believability of like the scene, okay? All right, okay. So, so now I'm gonna go ahead and just go, I'll add like some miscellaneous stuff in here as well. So let's go back up. I'm going to add some characters now. So for our scene, so there's people, there's different types of people you can add. I'm actually not going to have any people. I'm going to pick some animals. Let's say we can put in some butterflies here. And then if I come in, you'll see butterflies in the scene. All right. I'm going to put in an eagle flying around. Okay. If I scroll down here, I can put in some fishes. You can drag these fishes anywhere. Okay. I can bring in like some birds. If I click the bird, I can come up. Now, one thing really quickly. Let's say I misclick it, and now I want to select the birds again. if I click on the little scene selector, remember, on this little triangle here, this is the C squad, you know, these are the salmon. And then I can select it by that, and then just go ahead and then move it. Okay, so I can move the birds closer to this area where the broken tree is. Okay, so you know, let's see if I bring in my death squad of. Okay, I'm going to move this guy over as well, so there'll be a lot of birds flying around. Okay, there you go. So now, let's say I want to add like some horses here in the prairie. Okay. Now, I want to have the horses, let's say I want to have them facing the water. So if I move my cursor to the little gizmo here, if I go up on it, I can move them up or down. By default, it moves them on the ground. If I move it over this little arc, I can rotate him. Okay. Let's say that we want to have like two horses. I want a different colored horse here instead. Oh, that's a goat. Okay. All right, here's another horse, and then I'm gonna. So if I just, if I just rotate him, then they both faces this way. Okay. All right, so that's pretty good. All right, so let's take a look now at some lighting and some, some scene stuff. Again, it's a pretty simple software. You can kind of, once you begin to import your models and things, you can get a little bit more complex, guys. But let's take a look at this really quickly. If I click on right now, let's take a look, at my at the time of day. Look at the time of day first. Okay, so if I change this guy, if I click on it, this is the time of day. Right now it's at 2 o'clock. If I move my slider to midnight, it takes a little while and the scene will change to night, right? So if I click on this little eyeball again, if I move this little slider down, you can actually see where the sun is. The sun is over here. So that's E. So you see it begins to rise. And then it gets to the afternoon. And then the sun begins to set on the west, right? So that's how you can kind of begin to change your shadows and time of day. And then it gets to night and then dusk again. So it takes a little while when the sun is setting to kind of almost kind of readjusting the time. And then the moon comes out, right? And then it becomes night, okay? So this is how you can kind of begin to, play around with your lighting and your time of day, okay? So before we do that, though, let's set up some cameras first if you wanted to capture some scenes, okay? So to do that, I'm actually going to click on Media, and under Image, basically, if I create an image, I can set up my scene first. Let's say that this will be my scene. Okay. I'm going to go Image. I'm going to go Create Image. That'll be my first camera. Okay. Let's say my second camera will be on this side. Look at the horses. I'll create a second camera here. Now, the reason why I want to show you guys how to do that is that I'm going to show you within each image, you can change the time of day and everything else. So if I click on Image here, there's like More, and under More, this is where you actually create your time of day, location. If I change this time of day, so it doesn't affect my other view. It only affects this view, is the way it works. Okay, so let's say this one is going to be at dawn. It's in July. This is kind of where I'm at. You can change your north facing, which direction is north. Right now is at 0 degrees. So now if I go back to my image 2, right, and then now I click on More. I can click on Location, and then now I can actually change the time of day to a different time of day for this camera, right? So I can make it sunset. I can make it, something like that. So, okay. So the way it works is that you can set up your settings depending on the image that you're on. So if I scroll back to 1, it's dawn, right? If I go back to 2, then it's like more of an afternoon, okay? Also, when you're in the view, you can actually change a couple of things here. Let's take a look at it. You can change the weather, you can change the lighting. So right now this is the exposure. Let's go one by one. I'm going to explain to you guys what each one does, okay? So, so first here, let's take a look at the weather. Okay, we can kind of update our views later. Okay, so right now, it's it's morning. It's perfectly clear. As I move the slider over in the weather, you see that more clouds come up, and then as it gets to more cloudiness, it begins to rain, and it becomes a hard rain, and then the rain stops, and then it becomes sunny again. Okay. So same thing with with the season. Right now it's on summer. So as I move closer to winter here, I'm actually going to move this over so you guys can see that even the leaves begin to turn. So it's on summer, everything's green, and then it begins to turn to fall, and then it becomes winter, and the rain becomes snow. The trees, the deciduous trees, they lose their leaves, and then it becomes spring. The snow becomes rain again, and then it goes into summer. So by doing this, you're able to kind of adjust your time of day, your temperature, and everything else, right? So it's actually a pretty powerful kind of way of adjusting and fine tuning your scene, guys. Like the growth controls like overall your vegetation, like how old are they? Do they become very old, like a very mature forest? Or are they kind of like medium size? You can adjust this as well, right? Within each camera, right? So let's take a look. Now, under effects, you've got wind, directions, particles. Now, for the ocean, let's take a look at the ocean really quickly here. Enables on. If I click on aspect, what type of water is it? I can pick like, instead of a clear river, I'll pick tropical river. So it's more of like a green kind of a color, okay? So, all right, so there you go. All right, so let's take a look now under my image one. I'll come back to image one. So it's under weather. Under lighting, it shows you the exposure. If I take the exposure down, I take it up. You should just keep it at 0. Okay, but you can kind of increase the brightness and stuff of your scene. So by default, it goes to auto exposure. Your white balance controls, which color is white. Global illumination is the bounce lighting information. By default, you keep this on. It's just that when light hits the surface, it bounces off. Okay, that's what it does. The shadow. So the shadow setting is pretty interesting. It's the accuracy of the shadow. Because this is a gaming engine. If I increase it, then you'll see that I don't have any shadows, close by. If I go to almost nothing, then you have no shadow here. It's too close. So I think by default, when you had it at about the setting by default, usually it's pretty good. You want to play around with it when you're depending on what you're looking at in your camera, you see. So this is actually very close, it's very precise. And then here, it's probably about right. So you have like a mix of kind of close shadow and far shadows. Okay. And then these are just like the intensity of your sun, you can adjust that. So no intensity, 100% intensity, reflection, moon intensity. The ambient lighting is the lighting in the shadow area. If I make it up too much, then your shadow becomes a lot brighter. Okay, so I'm just going to leave it at like 0.75, the way they had it. A lot of default values actually works pretty good. So I'm just going to leave it something like that for now. Let's go back to our image one again. We're going to adjust a few more things here. Now in this image, let's take a look at our camera now. So our camera is our field of view. I can adjust my field of view to, more. I can see more of the space. Remember that if you change your field of view to be like a wide angle lens, however, you see more of the scene, but you do have more distortion along the side, okay? So that is something to be aware of because it behaves like a real physical camera, right? So let's say that my field of view is 110. Depth of field is essentially where your focus is. By default, it's off. I'm going to turn it on. I like it on. You can kind of adjust your depth of field if I go more. This is the distance of where my focus is. You'll see that if I go down to zero point 0.1, everything's blurry. All right. If I go too far, everything is sharp, but then the foreground becomes more blurry. I usually just like to keep it at maybe 1 meter is probably good, or even like 2 meters. You can play around with it. So maybe 2 meters. Okay. So that way the foreground or like the background is a little bit blurry. I'll keep it at 1 meter. I kind of like this actually. And I think that adds a little bit more realism to the scene. It softens the edge a little bit because, it's a gaming engine, everything is a little too sharp, okay? The aperture is is your the f-stop in your camera at a higher aperture. You'll see there's less depth of field, and at a lower one you get more blurriness, okay? Okay, so let's take a look. Parallelism is off. That's essentially if you have like buildings, your vertical lines will essentially be parallel. The vignetting controls the shadow at the edge of the screen. So most physical cameras, like light does not come into the your lens equally. So you'll have like the middle of the image is usually brighter, and then the edges are usually darker. So there's usually some vignetting depending on your lens. So you can play around with it. Like keep it at 40 or 50% is good. The lens flare is obviously Photoshop. It's it's this effect of kind of how much lens flare you get into the sun. So you can you have more or less. It's up to you. Visual effects, color grading. I don't use a lot of this stuff. These are just filters, like RGB. You can adjust the contrast if you want to. Right now the contrast at 50. If I increase it more, then it's, no contrast at all, right? So it's just, if it's more muted, or, I just keep it at 50% generally. Your saturation, how bright the colors are. Increase it too much, or it just becomes black and white, right? So you can adjust all of these settings, That's under visual effects. The clay render is just translucency. I don't use a lot of this stuff. Reflections, just keep that on. So that's pretty much, how you set up each image. If you're happy with what you've done here, you can always click the recapture. It will save all of the settings that you've made into this image. Now, if I switch to image 2, it doesn't have any of those settings saved, right? It doesn't have any of my depth of field. It doesn't have any of that other stuff. So that is where you want to, you can redo it one, or you can redo it all at the same time. Now, if I wanted to change all of this at the same time, the overall global, you do that under the image and under the, not under the image. You do that in the in this setting here. Your time of day, and then your time of day, and also your time of year. Okay. Now, let's take a look at this really quickly. I'm going to go back to my image, this guy, let's say, and I'm going to create now I'm going to create a video. So to create a video, I'm going to click here to create your video. So I can start from anywhere. Let's say that I'm going to start here. Now, in my video, it works just like my camera, okay? My image, rather. I'm going to start, let's say, my picture. I'm going to start from at this point. And when you create your video, you can make it, I'm going to go to more. I'm going to change the weather to just clear. So I'm going to start off from no, not clear. I'm going to go like maybe kind of hazy. And you can also adjust pretty much everything in this keyframe, okay? So now for my location, the time of day, I can actually start it like maybe even earlier at dawn. we can almost do like a time lapse thing where the sun comes up. Okay, so whoop, let's see, I'm gonna come back to my video. And so this will be my first frame. We'll start off from this side. And then I'm going to, oh, dang, okay, hang on a second. We'll go back to create video. I'm gonna come back to this guy again. And I'm gonna start off from here. Oh, okay, so if I start off from here, now I'm going to create the second one. So this is going to be my second frame, and where am I standing? I'll be standing about here, okay? Now, in this second frame, I'm actually going to delete this guy, actually. I'm going to start from here, okay? So I'm going to start from here, looking on this one. I'm going to add my second frame. And my second frame, I'm going to click on More. And I'm going to change the time of day. Whoop. So the sun will start to come up. And then I'm also going to change the weather so that there's more clouds. Okay. And now I'm going to go back to video. And I'm going to move a little closer to my horses. And then I'm going to click on the new camera position. And again, I'm going to change the time of day. Okay, and then I'm also going to change the weather. So it begins to cloud up and it begins to rain. Now, you can also obviously change your time of year as well. I can begin to, let's say I'm going to go backwards here. I'm going to go from that to more of a like a winter scene. Okay. So you can pretty much do like kind of almost a crazy kind of a time lapse. Okay, now I'm going to go ahead and get closer to my horses. And click on another one. And then now I'm going to click on More here again. Click on Location, change the time of day. Okay, and go back to the video, click on More, change the weather now so that it's actually snowing completely. And season will change as well. Okay, so we're gonna do like a, okay, so now I'm gonna go back to video. And now my second one, I'm actually going, so I actually created a new camera, but I'm gonna recapture it so it comes to this point instead. Okay, and click on More, change the time. Okay, and then go to Settings, change your weather back. Okay, and then we'll kind of go back to spring, let's say. Okay, and go back to my video. I'm going to recapture this guy, make sure we're on the right time. Then I'm going to come back, let's say, to this view finally. And then we're going to create another camera. And in this camera, I'll go on More, and I'll change the time of day again. Okay. And then go back to Setting, change the weather so it clears up. Okay. And change the season. Okay, so let's say that's pretty good. Let's say I'm happy with that. So I'm going to go ahead and play this now. So I'll make sure that you recapture it, and I'm going to play it. So now it's going to show me, so the sun is going to, oh, I actually, it's a little too fast here. So this also gives me the time of my animation. It's only 10 seconds. I'm actually going to delete this one. I'm going to start from here, okay? I'm going to change my time to like 30 seconds instead. Okay, so just change that to 30 seconds. Whoop. On length, let's go to 30. Hit enter. Okay. So now I'll play this again, then we'll see. So now it shouldn't move as fast. It should go a little slower. And then you begin to see the weather and the time of year begin to change a little. And then it begins to clear up, and then the time of day also begins to change, right? Okay. Yeah, so that's pretty good. So once you're happy with it, we can actually create like a little movie of this guy. You want to go to export, and you can export both the image and the video. Okay, so I'm going to export the image first. If I click on empty, I can click on this image one. Okay, now I'll click on more. I'll go refinement. I'll go to high, max lighting. I'll also go to on, and then I'll go back to my export command, and I'll go ahead and start export. I'm going to export just the image first. So now if I export, this is where am I going to save this? I'm going to save it. Let's say in here. I'm going to save it as select this folder. It's going to take you a little bit when you turn on like the max resolution and the lighting. It's going to give you an estimated time for the image. So the actual rendering actually will be a lot better than what you're seeing in the screen. The shadows and stuff should be a lot sharper. Now, if I were to take a look at that photo that I just saved out, let's take a look really quickly. I believe it would be this one that I just saved, right? I think is that the one that I made? Or is it this one that let me see which one that I made here. My image number one was, oh yeah, no, it's that close one. I had some images saved. So that's the image that I just rendered out actually, right? So now if I were to make the video, actually, let me just delete this guy. I'm going to, when I do the video, I'm going to go back here. I'm going to deselect the images. And I'm going to go, where it says empty, I'm going to select my video one, okay? I'll select this guy. And then I'm going to go, so here you can change whether refinement is on or off. Again, if you click this on, it actually takes quite a long time to render out. Okay, so you want to change, this is 30 frames a second, which is good. 360 resolution. So if I click this one on and then click this one off and I render it out, it actually will take a little bit to render out. Make sure you select this one, video part one. So that's the one I want to use. Okay. And MPEG, the format can be MPEG. And once this is on, you can go ahead and just go back to export and click on start export. So now it's going to export out your video. It's going to take a little bit, probably about 10 minutes or so. And then once you're done, you could kind of take a look at the video. Okay, so it's going to, again, if you click on export, it'll say, where do I save it? You can click on that folder, save it on your desktop for now. And then once it's done, just go to that folder and look at the video. Okay, so that's about it. I mean, you can kind of play around with it a little bit more. If you have a VR headset, you can plug it in, go to the VR mode. You can kind of view the environment in VR. Okay, so now this is going to take a little while. So I'm just going to let it go. For your end, just come back. It should maybe take about, depending on your computer, maybe 5-10 minutes, okay? And then you can kind of look at the video afterwards. All right, so hopefully it gives you an idea of kind of real-time rendering engine, and you can kind of use it in your projects.